here we go. Hi, everyone. I am Michael Lewanski. I am the conductor of Ensemble Dal Niente. I'm here in my hosting duties of the Dal Niente podcast, Fellow Travelers. I'm here this week. This week it's a bonus week. I have not one but two composers for you, Anthony Cheung and Wang Lu, who also happen to live in the same household because they are married, that's definitely a thing I want to talk about, is like how two great composers could possibly, too much talent in the same household. I don't know how you would deal with that. But
that's why we used virtual backgrounds, to give the illusion that we're 3,000 miles away.
There you go. When in fact you're just in separate rooms. Just some quick biographical notes for both of them. And I want to comment about your bios. That a thing that I really like about both of your bios is that it doesn't start out with a laundry list of all the cool stuff you've done, which of course you've both done a lot of cool stuff. Both of your bios kind of start out with like something about art, which is really nice, I think, because, so many people's bios seem kind of macho, and like what we're trying to do is, show how fancy we are. So I really appreciate that your bios sort of start with the art. However, that's not my job here. I want to talk about how fancy you are. Maybe I'll just talk about Lou first.
Oops, sorry about that.
No problem. We're all stuck at home, so it's just the natural sounds of home. Composer and pianist Wang Lu was born in Xi'an. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Please correct me, Lu. The ancient capital of China. Being brought up in a musical family with strong Chinese opera and folk music traditions, her work reflects a very natural identification with those influenced through the prism of contemporary instrumental techniques and new sonic possibilities. Since 2015, Wang Lu is an assistant professor of music at Brown University, where she teaches composition and theory. She's the Spring 2019 Berlin Prize Fellow in Composition at the American Academy in Berlin, and was a 2014 Guggenheim Fellow. She won the first prize at the Nouvelle Ensemble Modern's Young Composers Forum in 2010, and shared the Taktus International Composers Orchestra Forum Award in 2008. And then I'm not going to read the boring list of all the wonderful ensembles that have played her music, but just trust me that it is long and it's everyone. She has written a lot of pieces and has been played by top performers like Ensemble Dal Niente, for instance. Oh, yeah, she studied with Fred Laerdal, Tristan Murail, George Lewis, and Cheung. And she's published by Project Shot New York, and also sort of self-published as well. Anthony Cheung is, has been assistant professor at the University of Chicago since 2013, I think. But in something that I will never forgive him for, is now leaving Chicago to take a position at Brown, which I'll ask him about. And I will only let him take that position if he promises to come back to Chicago frequently. But in other news, he studied at Harvard and Columbia with Tristan Murail and Bernard Rands. He's also won a bunch of cool prizes. He was composer in residence with the Cleveland Orchestra from 2015 to 2017. He got the Guggenheim Fellowship in 2016, the Rome Prize in 2012, first prize in the 2008 Dutulia competition. He co-founded the Thalia Ensemble in 2007 and was a pianist with that and artistic director of the group. He is, in addition to being a terrific composer, a fabulous pianist. It plays jazz at a really high level, just as an amazing musician all around. Wrote a dissertation on Ligeti's Hamburg Concerto, which I actually didn't know until I was looking this up. One of my favorite pieces, and I'm glad to know that you like it as well. His body of work ranges from solo to orchestral works, reveals an interest in the ambiguity of sound sources and the subtle transformation and manipulation of timbre allied with harmony. And we will surely talk more about that. And I've conducted both of their pieces, and they're both close friends. So thank you for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I actually don't think I know this. How did you guys meet?
We met at Columbia as graduate students.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a small program, as you know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Were you there at the same time? You must have, maybe
he came 1 year before I did. Anthony entered in 2004, and I came from Beijing in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you met? Do you remember like the first conversation you had?
I think the first time we met was just prior to classes starting, and we went out for Sichuan food in this place called Wuliangye, which is I don't know if it still exists in New York, but it was like a staple of Sichuan cuisine in New York. One of the first like really authentic places. And we were there with another composer colleague, and yeah, that was like the beginning of things to come.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember I remember the conversation. A few things stood out that she found me very strange, and said it to my
She found
face.
you strange.
Yeah, said it to my face also.
She said, Anthony, you're so strange.
Yes.
I think it's, I only left China for the first time. I think that was the first week. I have had imagination of what America is and what Americans are like, from a limited experience from very limited internet and old film. So very obscured, and the expectation meets the reality of all sorts of, people.
Just your typical American right here.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just your average American, who's an excellent composer and jazz pianist, like we all are. Lou, yeah, what did you think was strange about Anthony?
I couldn't figure out if he was Chinese or American. You see? Yes. In terms of language and culture, he's probably American, but how American, I have no idea. I was only 1 week old as living in America. But if you say he's not Chinese, something, he likes the same food. And also what connects us is a repertoire. We're both trained as pianists, and we love a lot of music that could connect us, actually. But still, it's very hard to locate what he is. It's different from composers I've been familiar with, all my life. I went to the Beijing Central Conservatory and the prep school in my hometown. Very different cultural.
Yeah. Anthony, what's your response to that, actually? Like, how do you locate yourself? I don't know if I've ever asked you this, actually.
Yeah, it's a really deep question.
Because you're born in San Francisco, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think like a lot of Asians in diaspora, we have both similar stories and very unique ones. My parents were part of a generation that part of a brain drain generation coming from Taiwan, where my mom grew up, and my father met her there in college, although he grew up in Taiwan, in Hong Kong. And so they arrived in San Francisco just a few years before I was born. My mom took up a job at UCSF doing medical research and spent most of her career there. And I guess this is something that I was just talking about in another video interview for Asian Pacific Heritage Month for WQXR, because they asked me to do a video for that. It's not something that I really grew up consciously thinking about that much until much later. After I'd left home, and after I was in college, I was joint majoring in music and history with a focus on East Asia. And I was getting a lot into Chinese music, and especially Chinese music. I remember I took a course with Su Zheng, who is a professor of ethnomusicology at Wesleyan, and talking about all the developments in Chinese music over the last century. And at that point, just kind of realizing, like, where would I fit in this whole paradigm, because it's a complicated thing to talk about culture. You can't say, there are so many like hybridities and fusions, and this idea of a kind of one monolithic thing that links us all back to a single source is very, problematic to talk about.
Sure.
Yet at the same time, I always felt like a distance from traditional Chinese music. I didn't grow up with it in the household. It was
okay.
Complete opposite with Wang Lu. All my training was in Western music. All of I played in youth orchestra. We played orchestral music. All of my exposure to contemporary music was coming primarily from Europe and America. But I was very much in a household, that was, we celebrated Chinese Lunar New Year. We celebrated the Chinese holidays. We spoke Mandarin at home.
Oh, okay.
So there were just a lot of things that I needed to figure out for myself. And I remember the first time I wrote for Chinese instruments was in college. I wanted to do this chamber opera adaptation of The True Story of A.Q., which is this very famous short story by Lu Xun, early 20th century. And I really had to learn what these instruments were and what sounds they could make and their techniques, from the ground up. And that was kind of like a startling revelation for me because I had never really thought about them and dealt with them. And it would be a number of years before I wrote for them again. So my relationship with traditional Chinese music and arts has always been very much from the outside looking in. It wasn't until I met Wang Lu in 2005, and she introduced me to Zhong, who was a really important mentor figure for both of us, that I really began to start thinking more deeply about Chinese culture and musical culture over this kind of like longue durée of, really reaching back to its roots and origins with Guqin and everything else.
Wild. Well, thank you. That's a bunch of stuff that I did not know. And do you mind if I ask, what language do you guys speak at home with Mirabelle?
We try to speak only Mandarin, but now she's approaching 2. We realize since she's not going to daycare in the foreseeable future, Anthony has to be the English-speaking parent. So when she goes to daycare, she has some English. Yes.
So you speak Mandarin with her, Lou, and Anthony speaks English to her.
Right.
At the moment, we're both speaking Mandarin to her, but we're trying to figure out the right moment. I'm gradually introducing English words. I'm trying to find the right moment where she can recognize both languages.
Sure.
And that's hard because I feel like every time I speak English with her, it's like an imposition, and she doesn't react the same way. She doesn't. It's just this very abstract thing for her right now. It was the same for me. I spoke Mandarin at home with my parents until they put me in preschool. And I have no memory of this, of course, but I think it was very difficult. It's probably something that, in a way, traumatizes me to this day. This being in this completely foreign place all of a sudden and not knowing what anyone is saying. And so we're trying to. It's very hard in this country unless you're completely in a bilingual educational situation, which is hard even in a city like Chicago or certainly in Providence as well.
Yeah. In Chicago, if you speak Spanish, probably that might be the easiest path forward. But with something like Mandarin, right? Our infrastructure is not set up for that, for like a truly bilingual kind of like educational system. Wild. Yeah. I always understood, obviously we know that sort of children tend to learn languages very fast and but I actually never really thought about the challenges of raising a bilingual child in terms of like the order of operations and when you do what and that sort of thing. So maybe Lou, since we talked about Anthony's background, would you talk about yours a little bit? I know, and just let me let me for a moment acknowledge my total like boring white guyness here and say that I know absolutely no Mandarin, and so I'm going to mispronounce everything, and I'm just going to own that. And when you correct me, then I will say thank you for correcting me. But Lou, perhaps talk a little bit about your background, especially like the Central Conservatory. I mean, I think the Central Conservatory is a phrase that people in the United States know, but I think they probably don't know much about like the actual education system. They may not even know like all the great composers that it's produced. So say whatever you want about your background and about your educational experience, if you like.
Right, Central Conservatory. I watched the other podcast you did with George Lewis in passing. He's talking about how people don't know Central Conservatory would believe somebody like Johannes Kreitler would pay $10 for somebody from the Central Conservatory to compose the piece. But
yeah.
If you know the school, it's it's one of the best conservatories in the country, and I was there from 2000 to 2005 in the composition class of just over 10 students. Most of us are women. I would say the training I've received is very disciplined,
okay,
and thorough by subjects. The conservatories in the country established in the early 20th century modeled after mostly Russian pedagogy, some French pedagogy.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was wondering. Is I wondering if the sort of political system actually, because Russian, I mean, I studied in St. Petersburg for a bit, and like the education system there is very sort of very intense, very time intensive, and very disciplined, as you said. So I was wondering if it was a Soviet sort of influence.
Yeah, it is. So they believe in training as an undergrad, at least. They train you in doing things like you have to gain an ability to have skills, specific skills like writing harmony and counterpoint and orchestrate from piano score and to a chamber orchestra to large orchestra, etc., and to analyze form from small form to large, complex, late romantic pieces. And then they go on to 20th century. It's very systematic training. And each division of the music theory I mentioned takes its real pride in doing it, in drilling the students to ultra, last breath almost by the end of the last final exam of each subject. I'm very grateful for that experience. Yeah.
And you studied piano, yeah. So what did you take? You were in a composition class. Oh, and it was mostly women, you said. Yes.
So composition, you take weekly lessons, and then for other subjects, you take 1.5 years to 2 years, and they overlap. It's a 5-year undergraduate program. And most of us, and all of us actually, have already gone through conservatory prep school, which have already trained you in all those subjects, maybe not as advanced. Then you continue. So I mentioned this before. The biggest challenge being at the conservatory is how to make connection on your own amongst the subjects. What can you do with what you learned from each class? Back then, I felt like I could do nothing because counterpoint is a counterpoint, 16th century, 18th century, and that's it, right? Or you go on Shostakovich and Hindemith, and then still that's very specific. And then you go to a harmony class, and that's, from classical to romantic, and it goes on. And there's no overlap in terms of imagination and projects that you can use them, like precisely, right? When you learn something, then you want to use it right away. And then when you go to an orchestration class, you learn different things. And then you go explore your own music, the contemporary music world. It just goes almost against everything you've just learned, right?
Oh, sure.
And then there's the disconnect has always been there, and you have to almost split yourself into different parts, use different parts of the brain and focus to do each task. But in the end, the big question is who you are and what you want to do is left there.
And so, we should say that you have to fill in that gap.
Right.
And I mean, so how do you think that that's influenced? How does that show up in your compositional style? Do you think it does? I mean, I guess I would speculate that it does, because I think your music is both of your musics actually are extremely, I don't know what's the word for it, just kind of individual. I don't want to say individualistic because that sounds like you're trying to assert yourself or something like that. But your musics are very unique, kind of to again invoke George Lewis, are kind of very unique creolizations, let's say, of your kind of different backgrounds and influences. But I consider, I don't think, Lou, I don't think you sound like anyone.
That's very kind of you.
But wasn't necessarily meant as a compliment. It just was just a.
I take it as a compliment.
Well, good.
you only hear pieces, almost only hear pieces I composed after I came to America. Mm-hmm. When I was an undergrad, I also had to keep composing. The more I exercise, I kind of disown most of them. But that's looking back, I think that's a very important part of how you grow, how I grow. You go through stylistic imitations and you go through a lot of beginnings and being told they're not worthy. In this country, you can never say that to your students because everything they write has something. If you don't feel that way, it's because you as a teacher do not see the brilliance or the meaning or the potential of it. In my school, you would hear, no, this is just not great. Maybe you should not waste your time on this. Come up with different ideas. Mm-hmm. I kind of appreciate that process. It's a lot of revising and beginning, and yes, and imitations.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so like very different sorts of backgrounds that you both have, yet somehow somehow things have worked out. It seems. And sorry, and Lou, I did want to ask also about where you're from, because I know some of the sort of like images and influences from your childhood show up in your music, right? So, do you want to say anything about your hometown?
So, I picked this virtual background. It's a city wall from my hometown, Xi'an. The city wall is from Ming Dynasty, the 13th century. I grew up 5-minute walk away from one of the gates, and it's an ancient capital full of lives, with settlements from Middle East and Europe since the Silk Road. So it's the beginning, you can call it the end of the Silk Road. So it's a lot of mixed ethnicities and culture. And people are very outgoing in the way they speak loudly with a dialect, which is very dramatic compared to Mandarin. And they like to perform and sing and enjoy their lives outdoor when it's, when the weather is good. So that's part of my upbringing. It's not only the memory from childhood, they still, are the lives of people when I go back to people I know. So I would hang out and be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, have you been to her hometown?
Yeah, a number of times now. Starting in, I guess the first time I went was about 12 years ago. And
okay,
we would usually go back once a year. We haven't gone back actually in 3 years, which is a long time. We were supposed to go back last year, and et cetera, but we had the kid and everything. But yeah, it was such an eye-opening experience for me. I know that for her, growing up in a city where especially music making was so omnipresent, and especially outdoor music making and communal music making was so important. That really struck me because we, apart from a few places in America like New Orleans, and actually when we went to New Orleans 2 years ago, she felt an instant connection, to her home
wild.
because of that, communal music making experience. But for me, I had never really seen anything like that, and to be able to see ancient Chinese opera being performed by amateurs, but very serious amateurs, on the city wall. Daily when you went out for your walks, walking through the park and seeing like people doing their calisthenic exercises as well after dinner. After dinner, everyone streams out into the park and gets their exercise, which is something that I wish we had here in the States. It would make everyone so much happier and healthier. But that kind of experience was just so foreign and welcome to me. And that kind of like raucousness of sound from so many different sources, where you just kind of let it all in, because if you can focus on different parts of it, and but the kind of conglomerate experience of experiencing everything at once is such a unique aspect of being there. And for me, having never heard anything like that was so ear-opening.
Wild, yeah. This is fascinating. I mean, I think I thought we were going to listen to music, but maybe we'll just talk about everyone's background for a while. But
there are also conductors in the park, by the way. I never.
There are conductors?
Like amateur conductors. Everyone's an amateur. But I love this, and I'm sure Anthony agree, is that the culture difference here is very subtle. Like in the park in my hometown, you can be an amateur conductor who does the weirdest thing, who can't even follow the beat, who be dancing and moving and wiggle your ass all and everything else. But everyone's having a good time. And singers, a lot of them out of tune. And the dancers, I'm not sure if they're the most pleasant to watch, but they're having a great time, and this is part of their life. Once they occupy this space for the moment, that's when they set free their humanity. I think it's wonderful. And I was telling Anthony after we met, and then we would we hang out in New York. I said, oh, those guys, they'll be jogging. And seems like only white men with good physical presence are jogging and topless sometimes, But in China, you feel okay. Even you don't have any packs on your belly, you can roll up your t-shirt and have a beer on the sidewalk. You see, nobody's judging you. You're just trying to relax and be yourself and just cool down.
There's a kind of self-consciousness that's there here, whenever you're in public and whenever, and yeah, it seems like in China, at least, people just kind of like let it all out, There's like, if you're belting a tune out of tune, that's okay. And you have your t-shirt half up and it's all good.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I want to share a theory about that or not, but yeah. In any case, point taken. Yeah, we can be pretty uptight in this country sometimes. So why don't we, Lou? Maybe we could listen to a little bit of either Siren Song or Urban Inventory. Would Urban Inventory actually be a good piece to listen to in this context?
Sure.
I mean, and so Urban Inventory, it's a piece for 6 instruments and sort of fixed media. 5. Yeah, I just conducted in February, so you'd think that I could, but I'm a conductor,
no,
so I really
you're conductor 6, yes.
Yeah, I really only count to 4, so if it's above 4, if it's something above 4, I really don't know what those numbers are. But in Dal Niente, our joke is always like we say, 9 instruments plus, we whenever we we're making an offer to someone about a residency or something, we always say we can bring 9 musicians plus conductor. As if the conductor is not the musician. It's the basic, it's the singer joke of the new music world. I guess
myself with that because I wrote a piece that this viola concerto and called Assumed Rules, and I said, I think in the on the title page I said viola plus 9 musicians, 10 musicians, just feeding into the viola joke.
Yeah, the viola joke, right? But, yeah. That's right. If you're doing a viola concerto, you got to watch it. That's funny. So yeah, maybe which movement of just the opening of Urban Inventory maybe would be a good movement to listen to. And do you want to say anything about the recorded sounds?
Sure. So the opening of Urban Inventory is titled City Park. And it's literally inside the wall from the virtual background.
Oh, wow.
In the evening, I took walks and then I recorded some of the walks and edited the soundscape out of it. And then I tried to analyze the sound where the pitches actually appear, like, as a composer. And then those are from the dancers, the different exercise groups and the radio walkers, like walkers, strollers with their radio broadcasting. So you have the sound station moving in and out of the speakers when you're listening to the piece. And then I composed instrumental part kind of meticulously to fit in this already preset frame of the tape.
Okay, so yeah, you did a lot of work with the sound sources first,
right?
then maybe did you have a preconceived notion of what you wanted the instruments to do, or you really sort of like tried to map it onto what you had recorded?
So the instruments would have a role of fading in, but not intruding, right? Not putting on top of it, but also listening. Because instrumentalists are outside of the tape, especially when you see it live. Right? It's a different experience. Instrumentalists are like walkers. They walk through it. They perform along with it, but they have to be carefully listening.
Cool. Well, let's just listen to a little bit of the opening. Cool. Okay, we can stop there for a moment. And this is from your album. The album is called Urban Inventory. Yes.
Yes.
From maybe a couple of years ago, and that's Patrick Castillo. His group. What's the group called? I actually can't remember.
The Third Sound Ensemble.
Third Sound, right? Third
yeah,
Sound Ensemble.
I got to know them in Cuba actually. Went to Cuba together. Havana. Right. There's a new music festival. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've heard him speak about it. I should try to get the guy who runs that festival to do one of these podcasts. That would be a cool thing.
Yes.
Lou, before you talk about that piece, actually, I want to hear Anthony talk about what do you think of this piece, or what do you think of what you just heard? What do you think of Lou's music in general? Really put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because what I really love about that movement in particular is that it does evoke the sensation of one continuous walk. Though it's coming from multiple edits, and but the way that she stitches it together into this single experience, has the way it flows. It doesn't feel abrupt. I mean, all of the changes are coming very naturally. The fade ins and fade outs of different sources. And so that when you get, for instance, the sound of somebody's radio going by all of a sudden, and it's kind of like a street vendor hawking something, and a bicycle going by, it feels like this kind of like the stream of life just going by. And I really appreciate that. It opens up the senses in so many ways. I mean, and especially having been there, it just kind of reignites memories of sights and sounds and smells and everything else. So it is this kind of multi-sensory experience. And yet at the same time, the way that she's able to combine those pre-recorded sounds and the kind of like found objects, also the found musical objects,
right.
With the live instruments is really compelling because, instead of just kind of making a kind of simulacrum dialogue of those recorded sounds with the live instruments at that moment, she kind of recontextualizes it and turns it into something completely different, often using extended techniques or, extended harmonic language that has at first glance very little to do with with those original sound sources, and yet she's able to fuse them into something that feels very natural.
Wow, Lou, it sounds like you have a big fan here.
That's very nice. I've never heard England's such nice compliment from my husband.
Yeah, I mean, but I think nice. I actually like my experience was very similar to Anthony's, which is to say that I think you use the word flowing at a certain point, Anthony, and like I think flowing is such a sort of ordinary used word in the context of music. You know, this music sounds flowing or whatever, but this seems flowing in a sort of specific kind of sense. It does feel like everything is very fluid and like you're sort of, yeah, and it does have the feeling of you're walking or something like that, and suddenly a violin comes into view and you hear a violin, and then the violin fades from view, and then a radio and and it does have this kind of like seamless, maybe is another word that I would use, but I don't know, Lou, tell us why we're wrong.
Oh no, thank you. That's very, very, very nice of you. So I still think whatever material we use, I'm a composer. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to find a reason to stitch them together, right? Mm-hmm. There needs to be a thread, but it's not a thread, hopefully, that you can see. Mm. So I still think the importance of harmony. Although on the surface, there's so much going on, right? And random events, and you're moving, the station is moving. And I think what I really got as a thread in this movement is the harmony that has a much slower pacing to let everything flow. If you use the word flow. So speaking of harmony, I think before I came to study at Columbia, when I was in China, I separate harmony from my own composition. I think about gesture, I think about drama, sound. And then after I came, of course, your world is opened up to different things, and including jazz and everything else. And I was, hanging out with Anthony, and often he's talking about harmony. And his music is very rich and such curiously and sensitively listened. So I realized, actually, when you are not writing a chord, you are writing a chord in a sense. Even you're writing about wrapping 3 pieces of papers, there is a harmony too. It just choose to ignore it or treat it with care. So that's really behind the surface of music concrete, the chants, or, the editing or everything else, the nostalgia and the culture. Fundamentally, what makes it flow is a harmonic progression there.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely would not have. That's such that's such not the way I'm used to thinking about musique concrète. So thank you for that. Yeah, sort of the idea that harmony is underlying everything, even though sort of in a sense the idea of like musique concrète is that like the harmony, there's not sort of. In fact, I suppose I would say that the word harmony to me seems to imply a kind of an imposed organization from the outside, but I think you're sort of suggesting a different way of thinking about harmony, which I haven't thought about.
Do you mean that, like, for instance, that there is harmony in everything already, even in those external sources, so that we have to take care to reveal what's under the surface?
Yeah, there are pitch materials as harmony. There are noise material. There are noise with different densities, right? And then you map them. When the absence of the traditional harmony is also a kind of part of the harmony I'm composing. So you really have to, as I said, map it out and listen. You have to treat them. You cannot just let them happen randomly. Like you look up to the sky, a bird just flies by, and you just let that happen in your film. I think that's irresponsible. Right?
Wow. Okay. Lou is like the anti-cage or something like that. Interesting. Yeah, maybe. Cool. Maybe we should listen to a different movement from that, if you like. Do you have one in particular that you'd like to listen to, or?
Maybe the last one.
The last one, yeah, very beautiful. Yeah, great. Let's see if I can start. Do you want to get into it at all, or
shall we talk about it, or shall we listen first?
Let's listen first, and then you can then you can tell us. Okay, here we go. Obviously, like, I love that ending, and you can tell us what it is, but it's just, to me, I mean, to me, this music is just, I don't have anything fancy to say about it in the way that maybe I would have something fancier to say about the first movement, but this movement just is very beautiful to me. And the way it ends, like with this major triad that kind of goes out of tune at the very end. And then what's the sound that happens at the very end?
The sound is house being destroyed and the trash dump truck making the noise. Yeah. It's so familiar to me. I used to bike to school my entire life. I biked through construction sites along the way to my middle school, and all those noise, construction, the building of the country and the city in the 90s in China is really part of the noise I grew up with. Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
the source of the piece from a pop singer, Yang Yuying, from the 90s. I listened to a lot, and when you think about it now, when I was thinking about it, composing the piece, it's my teenage life. There's this beauty and there's this sadness. When you're a teenager, there's nothing to be sad, but you're very sad. You're often sad. It's interesting. I was the favorite student. I was doing excellent at school. I played the piano. I was liked and by the teachers and boys, but I also had a sense of the sadness. I think the piece captured that, the innocence and the sadness.
Yes. Sadness for me, sadness as a teenager was Shostakovich, but takes different forms. Anthony, I mean, I imagine that you were. I want to guess that you were a very well-behaved teenager, but I want you to tell me that I'm wrong and that you were secretly very rebellious.
Probably more on the just musically rebellious side.
Sure, there you go.
That was my outlet. I wasn't, going around, TPing houses on Halloween and that kind of thing. But I mean, I think
you were just TPing the harmonic series or something like that.
Right.
TPing harp tuning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very precarious time, when you're adolescents, and I think for all of us, music is that outlet. It gives you access to feelings that you didn't know were inside of you, or perhaps they confirm those exact feelings. That you're looking for something that will speak to you, and you find it in Shostakovich, for instance. That was,
sure.
I remember hearing a lot of his work, 8-string quartet, of course, stuff like that. That really spoke to me. It's just like, and you're just trying to make sense of all of these new feelings, and especially feelings of sadness and loneliness. And that's where music comes in. That's where a lot of my exposure to new music came in, precisely through needing to discover something like that.
Sadness. And I think that there's two strands in Lou's piece that I don't know, that seem to find some sort of analog or consonance in your piece, Anthony, called The Natural Word, which is a piece that I think this is actually a piece, I guess I conducted it almost a year ago today, right? That was June 1st, 2019, and now we're at the end of May.
Wow. That's right. Exactly. We were in rehearsals for it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I remember getting into LA, I think exactly a year ago, because it was Lou's birthday that evening, and it's her birthday today.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You're a Gemini?
Yes.
No wonder I like you so much. I just have so many Geminis in my life. I'm not kidding. Like, in fact, the date June 6th, which is in a week or so, is this particularly weird day in my life. It's the day that my conducting teacher died. It's my best friend's birthday. It's the birthday of my former partner. It's the day that Lee Hyla died. Very strange. Just it's a weird day. So me and Geminis. Today's your birthday. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. So Anthony's piece, The Natural Word. So I think, speaking of sadness, and speaking of also kind of found objects or something like that, your piece, The Natural Word, is this. I think it actually does probably require some contextualization before we play any of it. The sadness part to me is at the end, and when I get to the end of The Natural Word, I every time we've rehearsed it and performed it, it's I do feel just some sort of after a bunch of activity, I feel sort of sinking into sadness or something like that, and I'm not sure if that's the intended effect or not, but nevertheless, that's the affect that I experience. But I think I mean, as with Lou's piece, she took all these sounds and sort of stitched them together. Yours has this video sort of component that uses captions, and I know obviously Tristan Cook, is that your collaborator?
Yeah, so Tristan Cook came into the project a little bit later. He's the video artist for the piece, but actually the initial point of contact, before I had even started writing the piece or thinking about making a piece like this, was through Sean Zdenek. He is the author of a book called Reading Sounds, and he's probably the leading expert on captioning from both a from both a media point of view and a media rhetoric, and disability studies. Those three things intersect obviously with captioning, which especially the last of the three, disability, as being the raison d'etre of captioning. And so I read this book shortly after it came out, because I was trying to find a way to think about captioning. I've been really fascinated with just encountering it very serendipitously, primarily, while watching streaming TV and.
Yeah, when we first started dating, because my English was really not that great, I would say poor, and Anthony was helping me by turning on the capturing of everything. But still,
wow.
I would not get the joke. See, for example, you would pause and explain to me the reference to another film, for example, and then I think I take credit for the interesting captioning.
There you go. Yeah, it's all Basically, she wrote the piece, is what we're saying.
Well, she definitely led me down this path, and since then, by default, we've just left the captions on for everything. But increasingly, the default settings for captions, I don't know if you notice this also in Netflix, is to have descriptions of sounds of sounds and non-dialogue sounds as well. So that was my primary interest in this piece, is what happens when a caption is referring to a sound, whether it's trying to capture something that's on scene, that's within the frame of the film, like a diegetic sound, or a non-diegetic sound, something that's in the distance that you can't see, thunder rumbling, and there are certain captions that are just you wonder, like, who makes those decisions, and who prioritizes, and why do people prioritize certain descriptions, like thunder. Thunder is like, every time there's thunder, it has to show up in a caption. But other things don't. So it sets a mood, it sets an affect. It obviously allows people to hear something that is important in the scene, but there is a kind of prioritization and art to captioning. So I wanted to make a piece that really took captioning words and descriptions as the starting point, and have music react to these words. So in that case, it's very different than the order of things is very different than usual, right? Usually you start with the image, and then if there's a musical component, the music is added to enhance that image, and then at the very end, the captioner comes in and tries to distill whatever that is, both in the music and in the scene. Captioners also talk about musical sources. They'll say, like, the sound of romantic music in the background, or yearning music, whatever that means. So I was interested in these multiple meanings of these words, and the fact that for somebody who is who cannot hear, or is disabled and deaf, there is no like one way of accessing what a word like rumbling means, or what a word like yearning romantic music means. So I was interested in these kind of multiple perspectives, a kind of perspectival way of hearing things, and purposely sometimes subverting the expectations for the listener. I'm not trying to transcribe sounds from the real world, although that sometimes happens in the piece, but I'm trying to give alternate perspectives and takes to things that might otherwise be familiar for people who do hear them in the real world.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm really interested. I'm taken by this idea of, like, that you jumbled up or reversed the process. That if the sort of normal order of operations is something like, make a movie, get a composer to write some music that sort of supports the image, then at the end of the process, the captioner does their work. But it's like as if you're starting here. Right. And you're sort of working backwards, and I'm not sure which order the music and the images happened in, but like sort of starting with this endpoint and having that generate the other stuff.
Oftentimes the captioning in the traditional process is the afterthought. It's like the thing that, okay, well, we have to make this caption. Let's try to distill the sound down to its essence, and it's helpful, but it's problematic, right?
Sure.
And yeah, in this sense, I was trying to, the word comes first, and then the music is like some reaction to it, and then the video is actually almost an afterthought in this piece, because I had, the sketch of the piece and how it completely unfolds was all there before I handed anything over to the video artist Tristan Cook. Basically, I gave him a breakdown of every scene. Also descriptions of the orchestration from a non-technical point of view, just like what it's trying to evoke. And then some of the sources from the captions I had chosen, some of them, Sean Zdenek, we had worked together because he has a corpus through his research of films and TV, where he can type into his database, a certain word and it'll show up like 20 results. So we were looking at some of those, and then some I just kind of left open-ended, and we ended up using a lot of stock footage as well to kind of get at, and I left those decisions up to Sean. So I could imagine a different version of the piece where, with a completely different film aspect.
Wild. Let's check some of it out. Just so, I mean, and if you're if people are watching this, you'll actually see the video. But if you're only listening, then I actually would encourage you also to watch the video, because what this piece is it is a video with a series of captions and with audio that is the actual composition that Anthony has written. So let's maybe take, and this is from, I guess this is apparently this is the a bit of our premiere of the tune, which was back in on June 1st, 2019. This is me conducting Ensemble Dal Niente in LA. And maybe we'll just do some of the beginning, and then some of then something at the end, then something sort of midway through. But I also invite you, Anthony, to let me know what you want to see.
So yeah, maybe like the first minute and a half, and then we could jump to 10 minutes and 10 seconds, which is the beginning of the second part.
Great.
Maybe go for like 2 or 3 minutes.
Great. Well, there's a bit before that I want to catch as well. So
we'll
see.
Sure.
And then Lou, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Anthony. I want you to explain this to us after we watch it, and also tell him what he's doing wrong. So here is the beginning of The Natural Word, which I kept calling The Natural World for much longer than I am comfortable admitting. That somehow just superimpose that L there, but it is not there. It is The Natural Word. Here we go. Okay, let's stop there before I just play the whole piece. Okay, so before I ask Anthony anything, Lou, what do you think about this?
I think it's fantastic. I mean it. I haven't heard it for a long time, maybe for a year. We don't really sit at home listen to each other's music. So yeah, I think it's fantastic, and especially where you pause.
Did I pause in the wrong place? I should have gone on.
I think you pause at the right place. Yeah. Especially where you pause when you have the raindrops. The music suddenly changed.
Yeah.
I always really admire what Anthony is able to do is transforming things very unseen, constantly. Like the most difficult things for a lot of composers, most composers to do is to write transitions. He's always transforming, and you don't really know. It's like metamorphosis going on the whole time. But with this video, he has to stop this transformation right there and minute something into it. I find it great because, you know, sometimes you're so good at what you're doing and you're forced to step out of what you're best at, and it comes out as even better.
Right. It does. It is. I agree with you. I mean, I think that's a great analysis. And I would also say that Anthony is a composer who is great at transitions, which, you know, might seem like a really kind of a lame compliment. But I think given that, like, how hard that is to do, that's really like, that means you got like mad skills, you know?
Right. And it's very natural. I don't think he's even aware that it's transformed. Like the seagull to the bird, then the horn, it's like all interwoven, right? The harmony works and the timbre, and it's not as abrupt. It's not abrupt at all. As the scene is changing, but music continuously evolves in a really curious way. But then the raindrops come. I used to joke. I said, I really think he's such a talented, almost like I felt like he's a genius. Not like I felt like he's a genius. He is a genius. Anyway, and then what can a person do when you're already so genius? When you're a teenager, you wrote a I heard his first symphony and all the orchestra was like totally blown away. I was like, it's amazing. You hear, you have the facility, you have the imagination. What else can you do? I think this piece really opens up huge possibility to work outside of just concert acoustic instruments.
Yeah, but I mean, I also think, but that, I mean, a similar, you know, Anthony's pretty smart, but you're pretty smart too. And I think you have a very similar kind of way of approaching composition, or like, at least it seems to me as an outsider that the arc of your compositions is also, it also seems to me that you're always trying new stuff, or like, you know, you've gotten good at a thing, and then, like, I don't know, you have some experience that like causes you to think slightly differently about something, and so you write a totally different piece the next time. So I think, I mean, you're both like that in a certain way. Like Lou, that piece that you wrote for Ben and Katie, you know, the you know, it's a piece for clarinet and harp, and it's like, you know, I associate your music as being this crazy, you know, like often like, you know, very manic, even though we haven't listened to like anything manic of yours yet, but like this Christian Wolff piece, you saw a lecture by Christian Wolff and wrote this like very quiet, meditative clarinet and harp piece. So I mean, I think, you know, you must influence each other in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we often have discussions about this. Just you know, do we fall into our own comfort zones, and what does it mean to break out of them and to challenge ourselves, and whether we do that consciously or unconsciously. I don't think I was purposely trying to break with any practice that I had, you know, in this piece, but just the very fact of using a different approach to time through captions and to media and to perception forced me into thinking in more kind of block-like manner, and into kind of rapid jump cuts and that kind of thing, which I hadn't really done in my purely abstract music before. I think I sometimes, you know, fall into a zone where I'm comfortable doing certain things, certain transformations and transitions. It's never really comfortable because it's always hard, you know, but there are certain things that you prioritize and privilege as a composer just because you like the way they sound, or know how to get from point A to point B, and all of a sudden, you know, I mean, I was the one choosing the captions and choosing the progression of events in this piece, and I I knew that the overall dramatic arch of the piece was that I wanted to go from natural descriptions to mechanical descriptions. So hence, the birds and ships and ship horns and all that stuff in the beginning, rain, etc., thunder. But then in the second half of the piece, we're gradually moving along towards mechanical sounds. And there is this kind of like 20-second break in the middle that separates the two parts that is just silence. And so that was like my challenge to myself, is that, I set up this, because I don't really like to have that much pre-compositional planning.
Oh, okay. That's new. Okay, I just learned a thing.
Yeah, okay. I usually kind of find my materials haphazardly, and oftentimes through improvisation or through gestural improvisation, and then kind of transcription, like physical transcription, and then the materials kind of coalesce, but I don't go in with like a map of how the piece should be. And so I'm always looking for connections between materials that just happen to be floating around during the time that I'm writing the piece.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have that luxury with this piece, because it was more kind of mapped out, but it was still my own decision of like how I wanted it to progress.
Yeah. I think I want to ask Lou about that, the map question in a second. But we should come back to it, because I want to actually watch the end of the piece. Yeah, and there's we can skip the sort of the silence bit in the middle, even though I like that. But there is there's this silence kind of 2/3 of the way through the piece, and my experience with it is like that's kind of a dramatic moment, or like a kind of like not sad exactly, but kind of like stressful moment when that silence happens. But I think the audience, for both times we've done it, I think the audience laughed. Is that do you think it's funny, or do you, what do you think?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's what's happening in the film is very loud, and that's one of the things. That's one of the moments where I think the film was very important as a commentary.
That's wrong.
It's a film of a person who is turning up the knobs on his stereo, but he can't hear anything. He's temporarily lost his hearing, and the caption is indicating that there's no audio.
Right.
And so what you're experiencing is what he's experiencing, and at that moment, it's like an acknowledgement of deafness, because that this is a piece where usually the person who's listening to it is in the privileged position of hearing, even though it's my reinvention and my kind of multi-perspective take on what these words can mean ultimately. But then, this is a moment where we're all put into this same position. So that happens just right before, and then the last part of the piece starts, which is the kind of mechanical section.
Well, let's just watch, since we're talking about it. Let's watch that little bit of the piece, which I think is around here.
Yep.
And shall we just go on? Yeah. maybe just stop there for a second. Yeah, again, I mean, as with the end of Lou's piece, I don't think I have anything fancy to say about this other than just I really like it. I mean, and like the more I watch it, the more I like it. Also, you know what was actually fun about preparing this was that conducting this piece, I'm sorry to say, is actually not fun at all because I have to have this like fucking click track and you know, and so I have to like be like staying with the click and the tempo is changing a lot and that sort of thing. And so I never get, as a conductor, I never get the experience of getting to like watch the film and sort of the experience of like the captions and the music and sort of like having my expectations played with. So it was actually nice to get to sit down and like and I obviously I watched the film a lot in preparing for it, but I watched it mostly like along with the click track to sort of understand how what I was hearing was lining up with the video. And I really never had the experience of like listening to the music with the video until like afterwards, and like sitting down to get prepared for this. I was like, oh, this is great.
Well, thank you.
It was actually nice to like rediscover, you know, I mean, it's also like, I mean, in a sense, I kind of like learned it as a piece of music, just like a regular old, you know, Wednesday afternoon piece of music, you know, like any piece of music that I conduct, even ones with a click track. And so, and it's amazing. It's also amazing. And I think maybe Lou was saying something similar. What's amazing is the piece just as a piece of music just works, you know. You could just play it as a tune in a concert and everyone would have a great time. And then like, there's this whole extra like layer on top that really makes it like, you know, you know, it just really, it makes the piece like kind of not head scratching, but mind expanding or something like that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I think there should be different ways of listening to it, and also, you know, perhaps it could be performed without giving the audience any indication that it's meant to be seen and heard this way. You know, there could be just like a concert version, or a version with film where you only see the words and no images, and that might, you know, give something to the audience that expands their engagement with the film instead of having like passively receiving images to go along with the sounds. I apologize for giving you the click track. I know that.
Oh no, it's fine.
That's never fun. I mean,
it's you know, it's you know,
it had to be done.
It's just like, you know, it's like whatever the, you know, the senator from Nevada, you know, says to Michael Corleone and like Godfather Part 2, you know, this is the life we've chosen. I often feel like composers and conductors need to compare themselves to organized criminals to, you know, survive. But yeah, it's the gig, so I'm used to it. It's just, I'll tell you, like a visual click is like, you know, is actually more difficult. Lou, wait, we didn't end up using the click for Urban Inventory, did we?
No.
I don't recall. Yeah, I think we had it and then we didn't end up using it because it actually works just fine without it, which is actually like really nice.
Yeah, you were able to be as steady as a click track without the click track.
Well, you know,
right?
yeah. Any closing thoughts on the natural word from either of you?
I just listened to it really, same as Michael. I haven't really had a chance to really listen to it. Now I really think it has so many dimensions, what we just heard. And it really depends on how you listen. For example, maybe the noise can be the driving force, or the pauses, or the image, or the harmony, or just the contrast, the drama. In every possible, I always look for the threads, many threads you can path, you can take on, all make sense. And it's all like very unpredictable, but logical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I you know, I had a similar sense where I was like, as I was rewatching it, I was also like, you know, for the space for the weird piece where like the video is actually the afterthought. It seems like to tell some sort of like a narrative or something like that. It's a weird thing where like these random, you know, quasi random images, you know, where the images don't matter. Somehow, like at the end, like I said just earlier, you know, I end up feeling kind of sad at the end, and it does have that feeling of like, even though there aren't characters, there isn't a narrative. There's just somehow, it feels though like there was one at the end. It feels like a story was told, and I can't remember any of the details, and but I had the same kind of emotion and the same kind of affective response to how I would feel at the end of a story with characters. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that even though this is a very different kind of project of mine, I've never really done a piece like this, and I'm not sure I will again. That interest in kind of affective response and playing with your perceptions and your preconceptions of what constitutes that kind of response is, I think, at the core of a lot of what I do. I mean, I'm just both without history and with history in mind. I think because oftentimes I'll draw on historical tropes or allusions as a really important part of making a connection to a certain gesture or a certain chord, or G major chord of Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto as the Lyre of Orpheus, for instance, and that becomes the basis of a whole orchestra piece. Or in the case of another piece that you conducted recently with the Grossman Ensemble, Double Allegories, where this whole affect of sadness around the key of D minor, for instance,
the saddest of keys, according to Spinal Tap, right?
Yeah, I've only seen excerpts of that film, but I need to. Yeah.
No, there's a famous scene that we should try to insert a clip of that famous scene about D minor being the saddest of keys.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, it literally is in Spinal
Tap. No, I mean it's a hilarious interview with one of the band members who I mean, I think the joke is they're not very good musicians, and he's pretending he's like,
yeah.
I'm very influenced by Beethoven. D minor, it's the saddest of keys, and then the title of the song, I don't want to say what it is, but it's kind of a vulgar title, that doesn't, the Mahler song you're referencing in that in Double Allegories is the Lonely One in Autumn, right, which is in D minor. This is the second of Mahler's Das Lied, and the song has this kind of vulgar title in the movie, so we should stick it in here.
It's pretty. Yeah, I like it. Just been fooling about with it for a few months now. Very delicate.
It's a bit of a departure from the kind of thing you normally play.
Yeah, well, it's part of a trilogy, really, a musical trilogy that I'm doing in D minor, which I always find is really the saddest of all keys, really. I don't know why, but it makes people weep instantly to play a... It's a horn part.
It's very pretty.
Just simple lines intertwining. Very much like I'm really influenced by Mozart and Bach, and it's sort of in between though. It's like a Mach piece, really.
What do you call it?
I mean, speaking of affect, I wanted to listen to a little bit of Lou's Siren Song also, which is, I mean, maybe an older piece of yours. But I think also, I mean, Anthony, you're sort of talking about affect that is sort of going to the audience, and maybe kind of historically considered affect, the history of affect, references to composers that have used certain kinds of affects, but I think Lou, the expressiveness in a piece like Siren Song seems to be you actually have a source, a particular way of singing or talking, right? That you're invoking in this piece,
right?
So it's more about the sources kind of affect,
right, through the expression of the source, and the piece is inspired and kept the rawness and the drama of it. It's a particular kind of expression, right?
Yeah. Tell us about that. I guess I could read the program note, but it's better.
Yeah. So Siren Song actually is from a local shadow puppet drama, and it's a branch of the ancient Qing opera from my hometown. And this story particularly is very sad. It's a eunuch buys a beautiful girl just so that she will be buried when he dies. So afterlife, he would have a wife. What attracts me is the intonation of the particular opera, and of course the message is really distorted. But the intonation itself is not only existing in this particular story, but in many, many of the opera repertoires we can hear in the city park and elsewhere when talking about the ancient war heroes, for example, and the beauties, and many, many other stories. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we just listen to like a little of the opening, and then there's a couple of other spots that I wanted to try to hit.
Sure.
And this piece is it 2007 is what when this piece is from? Is that right?
2008.
Okay.
I think I did minor revision 2009. Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, you both have albums out recently, right? So I mean, Lou's was from 2018. Anthony, you have a recent. This Cycles and Arrows is older than another recent album of yours, right?
No, that's the most recent one.
That's the most recent one. Okay.
Same year as Lou's, both on New Focus Recordings, which is a wonderful label.
God bless New Focus Recordings, right?
Yes.
They're the best, and so that's that has several works on it, and
I mean, just sidebar, like if you're looking for stuff to do during quarantine, just go buy the New Focus catalog. just spend whatever $100,000, got listening forever, and people, just so much great stuff there. Yeah, really.
Just Bandcamp, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. So here's the beginning of Lou's Siren Song. This is with the Ensemble Intercontemporain, and here we go. Okay, but before we listen to the whole piece, let's stop it there. So I just love this. I mean, I think like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it just is like something superficial about me that I just love crazy music. But I'd like this opening is just so like manic and all over the place, and it's like I don't even know what image I have, like some sort of like cartoons that are changing shapes or something like that. But it's just the piece is nuts, and in real life, of course, it's a lot louder than that too. And so I of course don't have the cultural reference that you do, Lou, but it just like somehow I hear a piece like this and I'm like, this is music for me. This is written with me as a listener in mind.
Thank you.
It's just delightful is the word that I want to use, again, just I don't have anything interesting to say today other than just that I like all these pieces, and I like music that makes me sad, and I also like music that makes me like entertained and energetic, and thank you. I love it.
Oh, thank you. It's very interesting because some piece like this, if you say it's so crazy, first time when I heard people say it's so crazy, I was very surprised. I was like, oh, this is crazy. Maybe this is my natural state. Am I crazy? Is this, you know, sometimes you're trying to be crazy, but you're not crazy. Sometimes you're trying to be elegant and you look awkward. I was not trying to be crazy. And it's crazy.
Looking back on it, does it seem crazy to you or not?
No.
Really?
I still don't think so.
But is that a common reaction you've gotten to the piece, that like, or to other pieces of yours?
Yes, at least from that time, maybe 10 years ago, a lot of loudness and intensity.
Yeah.
I just never felt was it enough on page. I will add another note and then add another note. And then I look at the page, it's blackened, you know.
Like, it's not enough. I need more notes, just more notes.
Yeah, right, just more notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe could we listen to a different part of the piece that I think maybe and so the story is about a eunuch, but also, like, I think is there a reference here to someone in your town who had a particular way of singing also? Is that
yes,
right?
it's part of it's Lao Qiang, but it's related to Xinqiang, the ancient opera. Particular story, yes, there's some linguistic transliterations I use as melodic material. But more importantly, that's how people speak almost when they go to a farmer's market, or they fight between a couple, you know, or they shout at their neighbor, you know, and things like that. So it's then you feel like it's less crazy, you see. It's just the normal state. You see, and amongst the noise, with instrumental noise, urban construction noise, all kinds of chaos, because of the density, it's so much more than Chicago, for example, or New York.
Oh, okay.
And then you have this compressed sound space and compressed everything, right? Bodily contact with strangers, right? And the smell of things and everything. So it's a different state of intensity.
Yeah. It might not be that the music is crazy. It might just be that the world is crazy. which you know.
But maybe
feels about right these days.
Right. But maybe I when I was composing this piece, I was not thinking about filtering it through the lens of Western concert music or polishing it by a certain aesthetic expectation, or kind of trying to, didn't really use much extended techniques, but try to push the extreme within what they can play as a result. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's listen to a little bit later, just a part that I happen to really like, and you can say something else about it. So that doesn't seem crazy to me. That seems hysterical. Is that also wrong?
No, it's flirtatious.
Okay.
It's a conversation repeating. You can imagine between a woman and a man. It's proposing something. Well, is it real? Do you want to go? Do you want to take a walk? Or do you want to have a drink? Do you want to just walk along with me? Maybe not. Maybe you try again. the playfulness.
Mm.
Very, I'm thinking you just like harmless and playful. Yeah.
Cool. Anthony, is that what you hear in this situation, or
Yeah, for sure. I love that kind of conversational quality here. That is also, just it reminds me of just like that approach to transliteration of speech and gesture. It's something very kind of dance-like about it. Reminds me of like Petrushka, Shrovetide Fair, all these characters spinning in and out.
Totally.
And then like the linguistic intonation stuff is like not quite in the similar way because it's not sung, but Janacek for sure. Just that engagement with both folk material and spoken material that becomes songified, I guess is the word for it.
Spot on. When Michael was asking me about Central Conservatory, I forgot to mention one important thing is all composers asked to take folk music classes.
Oh, right,
sing in the class, not only songs, but opera excerpts, imitation, given the simplified Chinese notation with only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have to really listen to your professor or the recordings to imitate everything. And they always emphasize on how you're going to write music that reflects your national identity.
Yeah.
So I think that's part embedded in me. I never thought really it's like, I'm just me, It's always who I am, where I'm from, as part of what culture, that is probably not so much emphasis in American contemporary music or European contemporary music.
Right.
In general. Yeah. That's the first thing you learn at the conservatories. It would specifically say, write in the Chinese style, a particular style.
Do you ever
violin piece, for example.
Do you ever feel like you both internalized that unconsciously and then at some point had to push against that consciously?
Yeah, both. Because then I only realized that after I left the country a few years later, my colleagues at Columbia, for example, sitting in the same seminar, who is Italian maybe, he's not thinking about Italian folk music, for example. And what is he doing? He can be just him and believe he is the unique one in the universe.
Yeah.
And he represents him, has nothing to do with being someone from Milan or Rome.
Yeah.
That is very shocking back then. I was. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, in the US context, it's definitely unusual for a composer to sort of like, it's even problematic for composers to sort of use folk material. And really it's only very specific composers who, that's kind of one of the things that they do, like someone like Sean Yeager, who is interested in like music from his home state of Kentucky. And has sort of studied it and thought about it, and like, but he's really the exception and not the rule. But Lou, I remember when I was studying in St. Petersburg at the Conservatory, they also have obviously a really strong folk music department there. And, I was just so stunned the first time I saw it, where I was like, I showed up at the conservatory, this famous conservatory, like, that's trained all the great, pianists and violinists and great famous conductors and stuff. And like, there's this dude with a balalaika sitting on the steps, and I just thought, I was like, cause I was ignorant, I was like, what is this stupid balalaika, until and then I realized they have whole orchestras of balalaikas, and it's a very like sort of sophisticated and like really in-depth culture, and obviously and it's something that is taken very seriously educationally speaking. That was really a revelation for me. But that's actually your background.
Yes, but for many of us as undergraduate composers who wants to learn Western music, basically, who are trained as excellent pianists, felt a class dedicated to folk music in some ways is forced. You see, for me, I'm from a city and a family who, there's always folk music around.
Mm-hmm.
This is folk music. I imitate and learn things that way. For many composers, it felt forced.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not, we all grew up in the city, in the urban environment. Those folk songs don't really exist in every city, right? in everyday life naturally. And then you're going to Central Conservatory. Then you sit in the classroom. You're singing this Hunan boatman song, and with all the weird microtones, you know, you're asked to sing as closely to the original as possible. You will be called up to sing for the entire class.
Wow.
The next person, yeah, that's how you know, and yeah. When you were 18 years old, you had all your dream of a Central Conservatory, and you go in there. This is one of the first classes. You're like, oh, okay. I guess there is a reason. And after a while, it's fun, yeah. Yeah, but we of course we didn't know the meaning of it or how important it is to learn early on and to really embrace it and to make it hopefully become part of you, and that you can not intentionally quoting music like that, but it's your food.
But it's part of you, yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely is not the experience of an American undergrad at a U.S. university or school of music. That the first class you take is not like American folk music, you know. It's a totally different thing.
And you don't have to write it down. You just sing. You sing back to your professor and your class. Yes.
That sounds great. I want to take that class. Cool. Well, we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to like maybe listen to if we could listen to a little bit of the piece of Anthony's that we were talking about before, Double Allegories, which is a piece that you wrote for the Grossman Ensemble at the Chicago CCC. I call it CCCC, and so I can't remember what it stands for.
Chicago Center for Contemporary Composition.
Chicago Center for Contemporary Composition that Augusta Reed Thomas runs, and that you wrote in that they have this excellent Grossman Ensemble, which is like kind of like new music supergroup or something like that, full of like ridiculously good players. And I got to drive that Ferrari last fall, and you wrote this piece for it. And do you have the recording of it?
Yeah, I can bring it up.
I know it's going to be kind of a downer to end our interview on, but I wanted to come back to this sadness and like. Do you want to listen to some of like the second part, or what would be a thing that you might want to...
Yeah, since we talked about it. The first part is very kind of frenetic and touch and go. The piece is called Double Allegories because I was interested in kind of allegorical representations of things like the senses and the seasons and things in sets and cycles, you know, which are common themes and tropes throughout the history, especially of visual art, but also in music. So I make allusions to, I was trying to also connect that to some aspects of contemporary life. So, you know, the first movement, the sensation of touch, you know, is something that, for instance, there's a series of paintings that Jan Bruegel made of the senses. And I was also thinking about the Lady and the Unicorn tapestries from the Middle Ages are also a series of representations, allegories of the senses. But at the same time, you know, what does it mean to think about touch in the 21st century? And then that's, you know, you pull out your iPhone and that's like, you know, you touch something and it touches you back, right? With haptic sensors and everything. So it's a little bit of playing on these particular ideas that are still pretty relevant to us today. That's the first movement, and that's a very different affect than the second. The second movement is, so the first movement is touch and heat, and the second movement is solitude and winter. And that's what we were talking about, the allusions to concert music repertoire of solitude, and in the case of Mahler, of the solitary one in autumn, so not quite winter in that case, but this very beautiful second movement of Das Lied von der Erde. Were you going to play something in front?
Yeah, I've got, what I have here is I have the Schoenberg orchestration for like small ensemble.
Oh yeah.
Which I think actually like works really well in this context, you know, because because it's, you wrote, you know, your thing is for 13 instruments plus conductor. 13 musicians plus conductor, and this is the kind of small ensemble version as well. Maybe I'll just play just a little bit of it so we like know, you know, the kind of basic context. And that oboe like is kind of actually really referred to in the piece, right?
Yeah, they're just these allusions that pop in and out. So that falling forth, dee-dum,
Mm-hmm.
and then da-dee-dum, but it gets rewritten in different ways. It gets mixed in with different allusions to things like Gute Nacht from Winterreise, which is also in D minor in its original key.
Yeah.
And another song, in that case, a song about winter and solitude.
Sure.
Or Footprints in the Snow of Debussy, which is another winter allusion, or Beethoven's Ghost Trio, which is a kind of, I don't know if it's winter or solitude or both, but it's in D minor.
It's in D minor, yeah.
And kind of hovering in the background is not directly alluded to, but just kind of in my consciousness is Hans Abrahamson's Schnee.
Of course, yeah.
Which is a piece that, of course, all three of us know very well. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in this kind of like shared body of allusions and knowledge of particular cultural tropes or historical tropes. And in the case of this movement, it starts out with that kind of like very desolate landscape, and then gradually, as layers accumulate, it becomes something like a storm, with independent layers going at their own rates of speed and not really interacting with each other anymore, but kind of doing their own thing until it becomes this massive sound, and then dies back down. At the very end of the movement, the storm kind of dies down into breath. So we get the air sounds kind of take over in the winds, and that becomes the transition into the last movement. So yeah, maybe we can listen to. I can jump into maybe like a little bit into the second movement.
Sure, sounds great.
I'm supposed to stop it right there. We've kind of gotten into the storm, and all the lines have been blurred, and so it becomes this kind of massive sound at this point.
Yeah, and everything is sort of moving at different speeds, and actually some of the instruments are actually literally moving at an independent tempo from the rest of the ensemble, which creates that kind of like very jumbled effect or something like that, and I think that I don't know. I mean, I'll put it like this: I hope that we'll be able to listen to that whole piece in some sort of context other than your SoundCloud soon.
Yeah, there are plans for that to happen.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the beautiful job that you did putting that piece together and sculpting it and making it into something greater than I could have imagined, just on the page.
Well, I mean, both of you both of you write music that is like, except when it has a click track, that is fun to conduct, and so, so as long as you don't give me click track stuff, then I'm happy. But no, but seriously, I mean, you both, your music is, I don't want to say it's easy to give good performances of, because, actually both of your music is kind of hard, but it's so well composed that if we just do our jobs, we just sort of do what you tell us to do, it tends to work. So thank you for the compliment, but it's actually like, it's just because you did a good job writing it. That and the same is true of Lou. So yeah, I think we're about out of time. But it's great to talk to you both. And I hope, I mean, and how are you holding up during this bizarre quarantine period?
We're hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's as the weather is getting warmer, it's harder, of course, to stay put.
Sure.
And psychologically, it's starting to get a little bit more difficult.
Sure.
Not just with being holed up here together, but also with all the stuff that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
It's been a rough past few days, and it's
indeed,
hard,
yes, it has.
Hard not to have that just kind of feel overwhelming, especially when you're bottled up in a small environment.
Yeah.
But we just try to count the blessings for being together and for getting to spend time with family, and to see the little miracle that is Mirabelle. Yeah. And yourself?
We're hanging in there also. We're we feel very fortunate. We live in a house, and we have a yard and a cat, and as you say, it's just I'm grateful to acknowledge my privilege in this context, because I'm luckier than most.
Yeah. You certainly feel that way too.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to spend time with you, Michael, and also
likewise
to talk to my husband some non-domestic chore business.
Yeah. Right. It's nice to talk about art and not be like, did you change the kitty litter? Did you take that through cycling? Which is that's a lot of what's happening in this household. Right. So anyway, Lou Wang, Anthony Cheung, thank you both so much for joining us.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
What a great idea this is, and we look forward to catching all the rest as well.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I'm Michael Lewanski, the conductor of Ensemble Dal Niente and the host for some of these fellow traveler podcasts. If you have enjoyed listening to this podcast, I encourage you to check out our other podcasts and you might visit our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Dal Niente, or you can go directly to our website, that's dalniente.com. We hope you'll subscribe and stay in touch with us. Thanks for listening.